Okay, here we go. This is the Modern Music Easel. Hi, I'm Joel DeVell, and I've put together a challenge for myself to make a video about the Modern Music Easel because I'm a little tired of these steady camera, very well lighted, no awkward mumblings or trips of the tongue videos done by salespeople who just picked up the instrument. So I thought I'd show you what I think of the Modern Music Easel, my take on it, why it is what it is. So there you go. Here we go. First, what is a Buchla Music Easel? It's simple. It's simply a 218 keyboard with a 208 sound source up here. And it's powered. That makes a music easel. Now, why is it square? Why is it this configuration? Well, if we go back to the original, it actually was this square. It had room for 5 modules, and one module was actually power, and essentially, and the other was used for cables and things like that, and it was square. So we're actually hearkening back to the original with this Modern Music Easel. Only later, by the way, you did get these. Everyone will say, oh, it's blue, but no, it's actually only blue later. But everybody likes the blue, and they think of that as the iconic look. However, the originals were silver and square. So here we go. The Modern Music Easel, it's back to being square, and it's back to being 5 panels wide. And now why is that? Well, for one thing, this particular arrangement allows it to more or less be carry-on. And Don loved things that were, you could take on a flight, believe me. And things that were light. This is made out of an ABS plastic that's actually slightly thicker than the last version that had this kind of plastic. And I made it square because that way it fits these dimensions that more or less fit under the seat in front of you. I've been able to do that on a plane, and should fit in the overhead as well. Maybe if somebody's super persnickety, you might be a ½ inch off, but for the most part, you can travel with this. So why not use all 5 panels then if you can do that? And so I did that. And the other thing that's great about that is it allows you to seal it up. That means when you take these out, you don't even have to unpatch everything unless it's a extra high. These things, of course, have to come out. You can actually patch it. You can actually cover it with the cables still intact. Of course, not with the card, unless you've embedded your card. And another thing that's important to a music easel is these program cards. Now, originally they kind of came like this, and that was important to the easel because it was considered if you look at the name of it, and the name of it actually is Stored Program Sound Source, because the music easel was one of the first, if not, to use something external or even internal to save essentially like what we consider presets these days. So this was done with these cards that actually allow current control of all of these parameters, all the faders, switches and faders. So that can be done actually with resistors because it's current controlled. So actually what we're doing when I move around here with this card is the same thing I would do if I were playing and I was swapping between cards. Say I wanted to sound like like this card here. We'll go back to local mode. Right, just keyboard. But back at the card. I can go back to local mode. Swap out a card, swap in my card. So anyway, that's my card. Okay, so we've got cards, we've got these things. That is a easel. To make it modern, oh look at things are falling all over the place. To make it modern, we've got the Modern Program Manager, which stores things digitally. So now we have 48 of these. We don't have to swap in and out cards, though I do ask you to power it off before you put these in. Cards, when you're swapping that out, you can probably get away without doing that, but who uses these anyway? You have to solder resistors up, and it does take a little while. So I'll do another program on that. However, you've got the modern. So we've got the modern inputs, this modern input, but of course we've got these modern inputs. So not only did I just power from this left side, but we've got a few more things going on. Now, if you are familiar with the easel command, you are familiar with the new things on the 208C. That is, of course, the things I added. After Don passed away, I kind of felt like maybe I could get away with manipulating some things and no one would say too much. One was I always wanted these to be on the front, and other people probably did too. You could do that with the card, long story, but these are now on the front, of course, attack, sustain, decay. I've moved some things over here. Mod-Os was over there. I changed it to the color green. This is an old story if you know the 208C. So, and I made this a little bit more modular so you can get in and out, which is useful if you're going to put a module here, which we'll get to later. Nonetheless, I think this is a little more intuitive, and I'd like to think Don would have done it that way too. That aside, we're now on to the electric music box I/O over here, and this is also same as the easel command. You have some Eurorack inputs gating 1 volt per octave. That'll go to the same pitch input that this pitch input goes to, but this one is 1.2 volts per octave, as is the Buchla standard. And the pulses are 10 volt pulses with a 5 volt sustain. These are just the 5 volt pulses, but I turn them into a Buchla pulse internally. So it's just a 5 volt gate becomes a Buchla pulse. In fact, that gate comes out here. I don't have time to demonstrate that, but it actually goes here and it arrives here. You could actually use this pulse as an output if you had a place to put a pulse. The only place you have here is this, and you know, anyway. So, because pulse inputs are orange, long story. However, orange is the envelope output on the 208C and other 208s. Before that became a standard. However, red are the outputs for pulses generally in the Buchla world. So we move on. We've got USB inputs now, USB in to a card, a daughter card in the 208C that allows you to manipulate most of these parameters, many of the parameters, not all of them, with MIDI. And MIDI input, which does the same thing. Now this is also default going into the 208C. However, if for some reason you use this case with a different 208, like some awful clone, you might be able to have a newer, like a booklet, you might be able to use this, actually say you have the 218 with something else, you could actually send the MIDI here from this input, but that requires some jumpers. Let's not get into that. MIDI output, well, you want to be able to record what happens here. So that comes out the MIDI output, and the 218 USB actually is USB in and out. So you get both input and output from that. And you have your ground. That can be useful if you're connecting to another Buchla system, because what do banana cables not have? They only have one signal. That means they need a ground for a return path for that signal to reference from another system. Or if for some reason you're in an ungrounded system, ungrounded area or ungrounded plug, and you yourself are not that well grounded, you might want to use a grounding strap, which I don't have in front of me. But that can plug into there, and then you could wear them around your wrist, your ankle, or in your butt, or wherever you want, and it will ground your body so that there is a return signal for this capacitive keyboard. However, if you're well grounded, you should be fine. Your body is somewhat grounded to earth. Also, this rim of this is grounded, so if you're in an emergency situation, you find your keyboard's acting funny, you can actually use that to, well, you can use it to ground yourself a little bit more, or you can touch something that's grounded. That said, that's ground, and this is sustain. Sustain is what you think it is. It sustains a pitch. Whoops. Yep, if I put it in sustain mode, there it is. Right? And you can also latch, but that's another story. So if you don't want to use a sustain pedal, you can latch it with these two. And you can essentially... Anyway, get into that later, or not at all. So that covers these things. You've got some other unusual things. Of course, you got your main outputs. I'm using the master output right now. That's okay. It's the same as this. Basically, this is identical, except that you've got this mixer. This mixer will mix to the main output unless you plug into this output here, and then the mix will come out here. If you don't plug into there, the mix will come out there. There's a reason for that. That's because if you have, say, another module, or if you want it, or an aux card, you can plug the sound from that and, say, the Modos into both of these, mix them together, and send both of those to single gate. So 2 sound sources, 1 gate, because you got 2 gates. So that's the reason for that. This is in Unity. However, that means it'll actually be quite loud. So it's actually not as if it's halfway. It's actually, I should call it, it is Unity, but it's all the way up. So these basically only turn down. I didn't give them gain. This, however, will be as if these are turned all the way up, so it's a little bit loud. be that as it may. So that at least know, if you go from the mod os into that and back out, that mod os will still be at the same volume it came out when it came out there. Okay, now we've got some other things. We've got slewing. Slewing is kind of cool. If you've got an LFO, say, let's stop it here, and then I'll set up some things. Oh, here's a fun thing. So you can actually use the 218 and go MIDI out to MIDI in. Now, why would you do that? Well, you may actually have the external 218, and it may be the easier way to plug into MIDI in instead of plugging your banana cables all the way over to your 208C. However, there are some consequences. If you were to plug both of these in, you'll notice the keyboard goes from to. That's because it's additive. Cool. So now you get a whole tone scale for every note. It adds the voltage that comes from the MIDI daughter card with this input. So I would need to unplug this to go back to a normal scale. And it's likewise with pressure. Pressure isn't doing too much right now. See, it controls it even without that plugged in. And likewise with the pulse. You don't need the pulse. And you get the... However, if you've got an easel, I would recommend leave those in and leave MIDI in and out for other things that might add to your performance. Okay, here's a fun thing. I put a very slow LFO on here that you could use if you're really into ambient stuff. This will take about 30 seconds, I believe, to swell up and then slowly diminish at its lowest slowness. Come on, you'll make it. Come on, go. There it goes. And it's a triangle. All these connect with shorting bars over here, so you can actually take the LFO and put it in the slew in, and if you use the positive slew up and the negative slew down, you get that effect, as opposed to what you would get if you came directly out there. Or you could reverse that and create the opposite. Almost like an inversion. And that's very different from if you had simply plugged into the random. The random is, in this case, very digital sounding. So if you add some slew to it, slew might be a good use for random. You can, of course, slew. So depending on the direction of the slew, you will change the slewing. Or you can just even it out. Add a real portamento or however you like. So then you've got your pulse, auto pulsar here. Now what is that good for? Now here's a good reason. Well, your pulsar here is actually, it's not really a pulse. It's kind of it's like a ramp wave, or you might call it a sawtooth. Nonetheless, that's what it sounds like going through an oscillator. And if you plug that pulsar into this pulse input and try to trigger the arpeggiation, you get this fun skipping thing. It's not exactly what you might expect. It's doing its best to interpret as a pulse. Cool. However, if you want that to be a straight pulse, you might want to take that pulsar out into the auto pulsar, where you'll get that pulse. Now we'll listen to this. I'll plug that into here. And then if you're using that to pulse other things, so I can now switch between the keyboard and the pulsar, and it's almost the same. And also you could pulse other things. Say you could pulse the mod oscillator if it's in a low frequency mode. Whoops, I'm coming out an output to an output. I mean to go the other way around. I'm going to take the output of that into here and the output of this into here. You can get some interesting rhythms that way too. It's trying to interpret this frequency. Oh, and it's on the keyboards on, so it's actually doing some interesting stuff. But if the keyboard's on, and that gets us to the CV processor over here. Now, let me show you something. For instance, and velocity. I'll show you something with velocity, for instance. If you were to just use it, the envelope to control that. There's no velocity control at all. I could put a little bit in velocity into timbre, and that helps it a little bit, I think. Especially if it's already done. Now, if you have an easel command and you don't have velocity, or if you have an LEM 218 and you don't have velocity, that velocity over MIDI will actually come out the from card. So you can actually use this output in the form of coming out of the from card. So just keep that in mind. But on the easels, it felt like it should really always come out directly so you can be more flexible with it. Use the from card for other things that actually go to and from the card. So that's one use of velocity. But another way is to actually use it for velocity. And that is you could plug velocity into the crossfade that'll crossfade into the B. So crossfade from A to B. And when I put it into there, and I put the envelope into the B input, and then I take the output from here into the envelope. Now, I have control over that. That actually makes it louder and softer. It's nice to maybe add that, double in the velocity anyway. So even the glissandos, you can really tell the difference. If you do a slow glissando, you won't get much. So there you go, real use of velocity using the crossfade on the crossfade. Now if you don't know anything about this, I won't get too much into it because it gets a little bit more into the woods, especially if you're using the attenuverter. But look it up. There's a manual actually that shows you some examples that you can actually set an offset, and with that offset, when you do an inversion, true full inversion becomes a full 0 to 10 volt inversion, actually not going negative. That's why this exists. And you can also get some interesting wave shapes. Let's move on from that, and we'll see where we go. And now we've got this extra module suddenly. You could put, say, a 267 in there, and you could come out from the complex oscillator and go back into gate 1. You know? Control that filter with a pressure, which is going into here, and I can control how much of the pressure goes into or with the 259 in your extra slot. Where you can use I2C, turn remote enable on or off. This is your this. This is mixing in the mod oscillator. Okay, a couple things I forgot to mention. Because I didn't script this video and I don't do this for a living, I didn't put the audio directly into the iPhone. I just used the microphone, and I just do this for fun. So I thought I'd show off a few things from my perspective. Maybe I'll work on that for next time. Nonetheless, here you have everything, and I didn't mention the internal bus. This shows the internal bus activity. For instance, if I speed up the arpeggiator, you can see it speed up and slow down. That's useful, especially in 200E system. And if you have a 200E system, you might be using a firmware card in this slot, and you might be using maybe a 223E in that slot. And if you develop this, you might be putting, may say, a pot or a bananas, and tiny jacks fit into those holes, and you might be, taking this apart and replacing this all together. We, in fact, so I thought when I did the program manager, I wanted to have a remote way to embed it so that you have use of this card slot, and that's what this does. By putting the program manager in this little window, you can then also have the card slot available and a program manager simultaneously. So that's kind of nice. Hopefully this was a useful video. It shows you a little bit how you can maybe even make this into it. You could take this and put it limb over here and fill this with modules. That's a possibility as well. So this could be a nice portable system, and I know Don so much liked when people could perform live with systems that he liked when things could be portable. So there you go. Enjoy. So there's your Modern Easel for you. I can't think of anything else I need to mention, except for, if you have an aux card, it'll work pretty well in there. And maybe I'll do a video about using I2C in the system. I'll use this. Also, a couple of corrections. Somebody said Don put the 208C attack and sustained decay on here, and Don actually had passed away before the 208C, so I will neither give him blame nor credit for anything stupid I may have done, putting these things in the order I did here, or adding this, but I think he would have liked it. The other things are this always had a way to control the sequencer stage numbers like it is now. That's just a switch right underneath here. For the easels, I defaulted to sequencer stage, but for the easel command, it's just as easy to do. Just lift it up and there's a switch right under there. You can switch it over. And likewise, yeah, control this there if you want. Anything else new? Nothing else particularly mind-blowingly new, to be honest. It's just kind of repackaged in a convenient way that was really kind of the way it was meant to be, with them paired together. So I think that's really the main deal here. So enjoy your modern easel. Enjoy your collection of LEM 218 and easel command to make essentially an easel, or just enjoy the booklet world however you so choose.